Calamity Jane was known as a woman without fear. She rode with soldiers, drank with outlaws, stared death in the face, and laughed. But behind the gun smoke and legends, there was a secret no one was meant to find. Hidden letters, trembling handwriting, words soaked in love, pain, and longing. For decades, history saw Calamity Jane as wild, broken, and reckless. But what if everything we thought we knew was wrong? What if the strongest woman of the American frontier was also its most heartbroken lover? Tonight, you will hear the story America was never meant to read. Welcome to Untold Golden History. This is the channel where buried truths come back to life, where forgotten voices finally speak, and where legends are revealed as human beings of flesh, fear, and feeling. Today, we uncover a hidden chapter of the American West, a chapter written not in gunpowder or blood, but in ink, secrecy, and forbidden love. This is the true story of Calamity Jane's secret letters of a forbidden love. Before the letters, there was the legend. Her real name was Martha Jane Canary. Born in 1852, she grew up in a world that showed little mercy. Her childhood was marked by loss, hunger, and endless movement westward. By the time she was a teenager, both her parents were dead. She was alone in a violent land that demanded strength or destroyed you. So Martha Jane became something the frontier had never seen before. She wore men's clothes. She rode horses like a cavalry scout. She drank hard, swore harder, and shot straighter than most men. The newspapers called her Calamity Jane, a name wrapped in danger, chaos, and bravado. She worked as a scout for the U.S. Army. She guided wagon trains. She survived disease, starvation, and gunfights. To the public, she was loud, reckless, and untouchable, a woman who rejected softness, a woman who did not need love. But that image was only armor, because the frontier was cruel to women, especially women who refused to bow. Behind the jokes and whiskey was a woman who buried her pain deep and pretended she did not feel. History laughed at her. Men dismissed her. Biographers turned her into a cartoon. And yet, no one asked what she felt when the campfires burned low and the nights stretched long and silent. No one asked who she thought of when the world finally slept. Decades after Calamity Jane died in 1903, history believed her story was complete. Then something unexpected happened. In the early 20th century, a collection of old, fragile letters surfaced. Their paper was yellowed, their ink faded, but the emotion inside them was painfully alive. They were signed, "Your Calamity Jane." At first, historians doubted them. Could the roughest woman of the West write with such tenderness? Could the woman known for chaos also write lines filled with devotion and restraint? The letters spoke of love kept hidden, love restrained by danger, love forbidden by society itself. She wrote to a man whose name was never openly displayed in newspapers, a fellow frontiersman, a man bound by duty, reputation, and risk. Their relationship could not exist in daylight. In one letter, she described watching him ride away, her heart breaking with every hoofbeat. In another, she wrote of fear that discovery would ruin him, fear that her reputation would destroy his life. She did not beg him to stay. She did not demand anything. She chose silence so he could remain safe. This was not the Calamity Jane of legend. This was a woman deeply in love and painfully aware of her place in a merciless world. To understand why these letters mattered, you must understand the time she lived in. The American frontier was not romantic, it was brutal. Women were expected to be quiet, obedient, and invisible. They were property, first of their fathers, then their husbands.
A woman like Calamity Jane was already dangerous. A woman in love with a man of status, that was unforgivable. Society would see passion, it would see scandal. The man she loved had something to lose, a name, a future, a place in a rigid social order. Jane had nothing to protect except him. So she hid. Her letters spoke of stolen moments, brief conversations, a glance held too long. They wrote when they could, they waited when they could not. Each letter carried risk. If discovered, it could end his career, it could lead to violence, it could destroy them both. And still, she wrote, because love, even forbidden, demands to be spoken. What makes these letters heartbreaking is not just what they say, but what they reveal about who she truly was. Jane writes with humility. She doubts herself. She fears she is not worthy. She calls herself rough, unfit for gentle company. Yet her words are thoughtful and careful. She apologizes for loving him, apologizes for existing in his life. This is the cruelty of the frontier. A woman could be brave enough to face death, but still believe she did not deserve love. In one letter, she speaks of hope, a quiet hope that one day, in another life, things might be different. Not here, not now, but somewhere beyond this cruel land. Eventually, the letters stopped. History does not tell us exactly why. Perhaps he left. Perhaps duty pulled him away. Perhaps death did what society could not. What we know is this: Calamity Jane returned to the life the world expected of her. The drinking grew heavier, the jokes grew louder, the loneliness deeper. She lived many more years, but never publicly claimed love again. When she died, poor and sick, she asked to be buried beside Wild Bill Hickok, another man history often linked her romantically. But the letters suggest something more tragic. They suggest the greatest love of her life was never allowed to exist openly.
She never spoke his name out loud when others were near. On the frontier, names carried weight, and hers already carried too much. So in her heart, she called him only you. In the letters, she never introduced him. She wrote as if the world already knew who he was, as if the paper itself could keep a secret. He was not a myth like her. He was not loud. He did not drink himself into oblivion or challenge danger for sport. He was steady, respected, and watched. That was the danger. He rode with authority. Men listened when he spoke. Officers nodded. Townspeople trusted him. And he looked at Calamity Jane not as a joke, not as a spectacle, but as a woman. That alone was dangerous. Their connection did not begin with passion. It began with recognition. On a long, dust-choked trail, she had fallen ill. Fever blurred the world into shadows. Soldiers passed her by, assuming she would recover or die. He stopped. He gave her water, stayed until her shaking slowed, listened when she spoke nonsense through cracked lips. Later, she would write that this moment changed everything, not because he saved her life, but because he stayed. On the frontier, staying was a choice. From then on, they crossed paths again and again, sometimes by design, sometimes by fate pretending to be coincidence. Their conversations were brief, too brief, a shared look, a half smile, a pause that lasted a second too long. They both knew the rules. A man like him could not love a woman like her, not publicly, not safely. And Jane knew something else, too. If she pushed, if she demanded, she would become the threat everyone already believed she would become. So she waited. Waiting became her quiet suffering. She waited through nights thick with loneliness, through camps where laughter rang hollow, through bottles that promised forgetfulness but delivered only memory. When she wrote, she became soft. Her letters were careful, measured,
restrained. She never begged, she never accused. Instead, she wrote about the land, the cold, the miles. She wrote about missing him without ever saying the word miss. She wrote about dreams she knew would never be allowed to breathe. Sometimes weeks passed before she dared to send a letter. Sometimes months passed before she received one. When one finally arrived, she read it until the paper weakened at the folds. She memorized his words because she feared one day they would be all she had left. There were rumors, of course. There were always rumors about Calamity Jane. Men claimed her. Stories twisted her name. Newspapers exaggerated her life into caricature. She let them. Better they believe lies than uncover the one truth that mattered. The cruel irony was this. The world believed she belonged to everyone, while the only man she loved could never truly belong to her. As time passed, the frontier changed. Railroads cut through wilderness. Towns grew walls and rules. The West became less forgiving of those who did not fit. Jane felt it tightening around her. She wrote about this too, about feeling pushed out of the future, about knowing she was becoming a relic even while still alive. He responded with concern, with distance, with restraint. His letters were kind but careful, and Jane understood why. Every word he wrote carried risk. Every line could be misread. Every sentence could destroy him. So she gave him permission to pull away. That was love, frontier style, protecting the other person even when it shattered you. In one letter, she confessed something she had never admitted aloud. She wrote that sometimes she wished she had been born different, quieter, cleaner, more acceptable. Then she crossed that sentence out. Below it, she wrote something stronger. She wrote that she would not apologize for surviving in a world designed to break women. That line trembled with anger and pride. The letters changed over time. At first they were hopeful. Later they became resigned. Not bitter, just aware. Jane began to write as if she were already gone. She wrote instructions, memories, small confessions. She wrote about her childhood, about burying her parents, about learning early that love rarely lasts. She never blamed him. That was the hardest part. She knew the truth. The frontier did not allow happy endings for people like them. Eventually, his letters slowed, then stopped. No explanation survives. Maybe he was transferred. Maybe he married. Maybe duty finally demanded silence. Jane did not chase him. She did not confront him. She wrote one last letter. It was shorter than the rest. She told him she hoped he slept peacefully. She told him she carried no anger. She told him he changed her life simply by seeing her. At the end, she wrote, "If there is another world beyond this one, perhaps we will meet without fear." Then she signed it, as always, "Your Calamity Jane." After that, the mask returned. She became louder, more reckless, more exaggerated. If the world wanted a legend, she would give them one. But the letters reveal the cost. Behind the bravado was a woman who had learned that loving quietly was sometimes the only way to love at all. Years later, when historians debated whether the letters were real, they focused on handwriting, ink, and dates. They missed the simplest truth. No one invents pain like this. No one fabricates restraint so convincing. No one imagines heartbreak with such dignity unless they have lived it. Calamity Jane did not fail at love. Love failed to survive the world she lived in. And yet, it changed her forever. Because once you are seen, truly seen, you never forget what that felt like.
The years moved forward, but inside Jane, time stayed frozen. Every morning she woke to the same weight in her chest. Every night she slept with memories instead of dreams. She traveled from camp to camp, town to town, always moving. Movement was easier than stillness. Stillness made her think. Thinking made her remember. People laughed when they saw her. Some admired her. Most mocked her. They saw the boots, the gun, the rough voice. They did not see the silence that followed her everywhere. At night, when fires burned low, she sat alone. Men told stories. Men sang songs about love and victory. Jane listened without speaking. She had loved once. That was enough. Sometimes she took out the letters. She kept them wrapped in cloth, hidden deep in her pack. She did not read them often. Reading hurt. But sometimes the pain felt better than emptiness. She traced the words with her fingers. Simple words, careful words, words written by a man who had once seen her clearly. That memory was both a gift and a curse. The frontier grew harsher. People wanted order now, rules, respectability. There was no place for women like Calamity Jane anymore. She felt eyes on her everywhere, judging eyes, suspicious eyes. A woman alone was dangerous. A woman like her was unacceptable. She was pushed out of jobs, denied shelter, turned into a joke for entertainment, and yet she endured, because she had endured worse. She remembered her parents dying. She remembered hunger. She remembered learning to ride to survive. Pain was familiar. Love had been the surprise. Sometimes she wondered what his life had become. Had he married? Had he children? Did he ever think of her? She told herself it did not matter. She told herself she had made peace, but the heart does not listen to reason. One winter, sickness took hold of her again. Cold nights, weak body, no one stayed. As she lay shivering, she remembered the first time he had stayed. How different everything felt then. She laughed softly to herself, a sad laugh. Even in weakness, she did not ask for help. That was her pride and her punishment. News stories continued to shape her image. They painted her as wild, drunk, careless. They erased her tenderness. Jane read one article and burned it, not out of anger, but exhaustion. Let them write what they want, she thought. The truth was not theirs. Her letters were her truth. Years passed like this, quiet suffering hidden beneath noise. Then came the realization. It did not arrive loudly. It came slowly, like dawn. Jane understood that the world had never been built for her happiness. It had been built for her survival, and she had survived. She began to see her love differently, not as something stolen from her, but as something that proved she was capable of deep feeling. That mattered, even if no one else knew. She stopped waiting, not because hope died, but because she chose herself. She drank less, she spoke less, she watched more. She became older, wiser, tired. One day she met a young woman traveling west, scared, lost. Jane helped her find food, helped her find work, gave her advice. The girl looked at Jane with gratitude and asked, "How did you survive out here alone?" Jane thought of the letters, thought of love, thought of loss. She answered simply, "You learn what matters." That night, Jane cried quietly, not from pain, from release. She understood then that her life was not a failure, it was a lesson. Love had not saved her, but it had shaped her. It taught her empathy, it taught her restraint, it taught her dignity in silence. Toward the end of her life, Jane grew weaker. Her body carried the cost of years on the frontier. She knew her time was coming. She arranged her few belongings. She kept the letters close. When death finally came, it was not dramatic. It was quiet, like her love had been. She was buried near Wild Bill Hickok, as she had requested. History focused on that story. But the letters remained, waiting.
Years later, when hands opened them, the world finally heard her real voice, not loud, not wild, but honest. Calamity Jane was not just a legend. She was a woman who loved deeply in a cruel world, a woman who chose silence over destruction, a woman who carried heartbreak with strength. And in those hidden letters, her love lived on.
As the years passed, Jane's name became heavier than her body. People spoke it before she arrived. They laughed before she opened her mouth. They decided who she was before she ever spoke. She learned to let them. There was power in not correcting lies. There was safety in letting the world believe what it wanted. But inside, she carried a quiet truth no one could touch. She had loved, and she had been loved back, even if only in shadows. Sometimes, late at night, she spoke to him in her thoughts. She told him about the places she had seen, the rivers, the storms, the empty roads. She imagined his replies, calm, careful, kind. This imagining kept her alive. The frontier aged her fast. Her hands grew rougher, her back bent, her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed sharp. She watched how the world treated women, how dreams were crushed early, how hope was traded for survival. When she could, she helped. She guided lost travelers. She warned young girls about men who smiled too easily. She gave food to those who had none. No one wrote stories about this. Kindness did not sell newspapers. Drunken fights did. Jane knew her image had become a tool. People invited her to towns like a performance. Come see the wild woman of the West. She went because she needed money. She endured the laughter because she had endured worse. But each time, something inside her pulled tighter. She remembered how carefully he had written, how every word showed respect. That memory stood in sharp contrast to the world around her. Once, a man mocked her openly, calling her unlovable. The crowd laughed. Jane did not respond. She had already been loved. His words held no power. That was karma in its quietest form. The world punished her for being different, but it could not take away what she had known. In quiet moments, Jane reflected on her life. She did not regret her choices. She regretted the world that made those choices necessary. She wondered what history would say about her. She suspected it would get most things wrong, and she was right. Toward the end, illness returned. Her body weakened faster than her spirit. She stayed in cheap rooms, cold rooms, rooms that smelled of dust and old wood. She slept with the letters under her pillow, not because she read them anymore, but because they reminded her who she had been, a woman capable of love, a woman capable of restraint. Sometimes she thought about burning them to protect his name, to erase temptation. But she did not. Some truths deserve to survive. She began to understand something important. Love does not always lead to a shared life. Sometimes it leads to a deeper understanding of oneself. Her love had taught her that she was not broken. She was simply born into a hard world. That realization brought peace. When she spoke of death, she did not fear it. She feared being forgotten as only a joke. She wanted to be remembered as human. She told one friend near the end, "I was more than what they say." That was all. After she died, the world moved on quickly. Legends are easier to remember than people. Her belongings were scattered. Her name lived on in stories that grew less accurate with time. But the letters survived, hidden, protected, patient. When they were finally discovered, people were shocked. They did not expect softness from someone so rough. They did not expect intelligence from someone so mocked. The letters forced history to pause. They revealed a woman who thought deeply, who loved quietly, who sacrificed her own happiness to protect another.
They revealed restraint as courage. And suddenly, the legend cracked. People began to see Calamity Jane differently, not as a mistake, but as a product of cruelty and strength. Her forbidden love became proof of her humanity. In the end, her story was not about scandal. It was about survival, about dignity, about choosing silence when noise would destroy. Karma came gently. She did not get the life she wanted, but she left behind a truth that changed how the world saw her. And that truth mattered.
Time passed, and the world kept telling her who she was. Jane listened without arguing. Arguing took energy. Energy was something she no longer had. Her body ached in places she could not name. Old injuries spoke louder than memory. Cold mornings were the worst. Still she rose. Still she walked. Still she lived. She had learned that living itself was a kind of defiance. Sometimes she dreamed of him, not as he was at the end, but as he had been at the beginning. Calm eyes, a steady voice, a presence that made the world feel less sharp. In her dreams they spoke freely, no fear, no rules. Then she woke. Reality always returned quickly. She did not curse fate. She had done that enough in her youth. Now she observed it. She saw how people chased love loudly, how they demanded it, how they broke each other over it. Her love had been quiet, and because it was quiet, it had lasted. That thought brought comfort. In the last years of her life, Jane spent more time alone. Crowds tired her. Noise overwhelmed her. She sat by windows and watched the world move. Wagons passed. Children ran. Life continued. She felt separate from it, but not bitter. She had played her part. Sometimes strangers asked her about the old days, about battles, about Wild Bill, about danger. She answered briefly. They wanted excitement. She offered truth in small pieces. No one asked about love. Perhaps they did not believe someone like her could love. That was fine. Her love had never needed an audience. As her strength faded, she thought often about meaning. What made a life worth remembering? It was not fame, it was not legend, it was moments. The moment someone stayed, the moment someone listened, the moment someone chose kindness in a cruel place. She had known those moments. That was enough. One evening, as the sun fell low, Jane felt a deep calm, a calm she had not known before. She took out the letters one last time. She did not read them word by word. She already knew them. She held them and closed her eyes. She thanked him silently, not for loving her, but for seeing her. That had changed everything. Her breathing slowed. The room grew quiet. Jane was not afraid. She understood now that love does not promise happiness, it promises truth, and truth had carried her through. When she passed, there were no great speeches, no crowds, just silence. But silence does not mean absence. Years later, when historians and readers found the letters, they felt something unexpected. They felt respect. The letters did not ask for sympathy. They did not beg for forgiveness. They simply existed. They told the story of a woman who loved with discipline, who accepted loss without cruelty, who chose protection over possession. That is rare. In reading them, people began to question the stories they had been told. They saw how easily society flattens people into symbols, how easily it ignores complexity. Calamity Jane became more than a legend again. She became real. Her forbidden love was no longer a secret, but it was never scandal. It was courage. It was restraint. It was humanity surviving in a brutal world. Her story did not end with tragedy. It ended with understanding. Because love,
even when hidden, leaves a mark, and her mark endured.
The final years of Calamity Jane's life passed quietly, almost gently. For someone who had lived through chaos, this felt earned. She no longer chased the past. She no longer fought the stories told about her. She let them exist, separate from who she truly was. Inside, she carried peace. When people spoke her name, they spoke of noise and danger. But the truth of her life lived in stillness. She had learned that not every love is meant to be lived out loud. Some loves exist to teach. Some loves exist to shape. Hers had done both. The frontier eventually faded into history. The wild places were mapped. The rules became firm. The world that had shaped her disappeared. But her letters remained. They outlived the lies. They outlived the laughter. They outlived the myth. When they were read, carefully and slowly, they changed how people understood strength. Strength was no longer just loud courage. It was quiet sacrifice. It was choosing silence to protect another life. This was Jane's karma. She had been judged unfairly in life, but understood more deeply in death. People who once laughed now listened. People who once dismissed now reflected. Her story taught something important. A person can be strong and gentle. A person can be wild and thoughtful. A person can be misunderstood and still live with dignity. Calamity Jane did not get the ending she deserved by society's standards, but she earned something greater: truth. Her forbidden love was never a weakness. It was proof that even in the harshest places, the human heart still reaches for connection. In the end, her letters did not reveal scandal. They revealed restraint. They revealed empathy. They revealed a woman ahead of her time. And that is how her story should be remembered. Not as a joke, not as a myth, but as a woman who loved deeply, suffered quietly, and left behind a truth strong enough to survive history. If this hidden love story moved you, don't let history stay silent. Follow this page and subscribe to Untold Golden History, where forgotten voices finally speak.